pas découvrir ce qu'eux ils prennent au niveau d'Afrique. C'est pour ça qu'ils sont en train de mentir. Ils disent l'AES, c'est une zone rouge. Ils ont dit, c'est une zone rouge.
History does not wait for permission. It is made by those courageous enough to rise when the odds are against them, by those who refuse to let the dreams of their ancestors die quietly. Today, a new chapter in Africa's long story of resilience and self-determination is being written. Across the continent and beyond, a call is echoing louder with each passing day. A call for dignity, sovereignty, and unity. On April 30th, this call will turn into a roar, as people across Africa and its vast diaspora rise in solidarity. They will not march merely in support of one man. They will march to declare that the destiny of African nations must be decided by Africans themselves. If you believe that the right to shape one's own future is sacred, if you believe that true freedom is not given but claimed, then this moment belongs to you as well. Subscribe to this channel to become part of this growing movement, and together, let us ensure that the voices of those fighting for their freedom are not silenced, but amplified across the world. The upcoming protests centered around Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso symbolize far more than the fate of one leader. They are a manifestation of a deep, historical yearning for genuine sovereignty that has smoldered across Africa for generations. These protests are not the beginning of a movement. They are the continuation of a long and unbroken chain of resistance against forces that have sought to divide, dominate, and dictate the future of an entire continent. To understand the depth of this moment, we must look backward. The struggle for African sovereignty is as old as colonial intrusion itself. From the moment European powers, at the Berlin Conference of 1884, divided Africa into arbitrary territories without consultation or consent, Africans have fought to reclaim what was stolen. Not just land and resources, but the very right to self-governance. Every independence movement, every rebellion, every act of defiance has carried forward the same fundamental demand: the right to be the authors of their own story. That story, however, has been brutally interrupted time and time again. From Ghana to Algeria, from Kenya to Mozambique, initial victories over colonial rule were too often followed by the quiet, but no less devastating entrenchment of neo-colonialism. Through economic dependency, political manipulation, and cultural domination, foreign powers found new ways to maintain control, even as African flags were raised in proud ceremony. In this context, the protests of April 30th are not a rupture with the past, but a rightful continuation of a struggle that is far from over. Today, this growing call for sovereignty has reached not only the streets of African capitals, but the halls of foreign governments. Even in the United States Senate, recent hearings have addressed the implications of foreign influence and intervention across African affairs.
Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traore and Burkina Faso, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime. There's a number of examples across. Even in Sudan, what's going on with the rapid support forces in Burhan of the Sudan forces, when you get down to it, it's all about the revenue that can be drawn out of that. And there are nefarious actors in the CCP or in sometimes Russia are complicit in those activities.
Okay, well, you can't imagine how frustrating it seems to me that this mineral-rich continent.
What many Africans have known and experienced firsthand is now increasingly being acknowledged on the world stage. True independence for African nations remains an unfinished and urgent project. At the center of this new wave of resistance stands Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a leader whose rise reflects the anger and hope of a generation disillusioned with empty promises. Traoré assumed leadership not as a mere political opportunist, but as a voice for millions who felt abandoned by a system that served elites at the expense of the people. His bold rejection of traditional neo-colonial ties, his insistence on prioritizing agricultural independence, educational reform, and national dignity struck a nerve across Burkina Faso and resonated across borders. Traoré's vision is radical, not because it is extreme, but because it is unflinchingly honest. He demands a future where Burkina Faso is not dependent on foreign aid that comes with strings attached, where its children are educated not to serve others, but to lead themselves, where its resources are used not for foreign corporations, but for the benefit of its own citizens. In a world where true sovereignty is still too often seen as a threat rather than a right, such a vision is revolutionary. That revolution, however, does not come without peril. Recently, an assassination attempt on Captain Traoré sent shockwaves across the continent.
The news that Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has reportedly survived yet another assassination attempt amidst growing political instability in his country is not only alarming, but also deeply symbolic of the ongoing struggles that African leaders face when they dare to challenge the status quo.
It was a chilling reminder that the forces opposing African sovereignty are not abstract. They are real, organized, and prepared to defend their interests at all costs. The attempt on his life is not an isolated incident. It is part of a brutal legacy in which African leaders who dared to dream differently, leaders like Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and many others, were systematically targeted, removed, and, too often, murdered. Traoré's survival is more than personal resilience. It is symbolic of a wider awakening. It signals that this generation will not so easily be intimidated or deterred. It proves that the spirit of sovereignty, once reignited, is not so easily extinguished. This is why the protests on April 30th are so critical. They are not simply about one man. They are about defending the very idea that Africans have the right to lead themselves, to resist foreign control, and to shape their own destinies. In today's digital age, the struggle has moved beyond traditional battlefields into the realm of ideas and connectivity. Social media has transformed the landscape of activism, giving everyday Africans powerful tools to organize, educate, and resist. Hashtags like Mars Stand With Traoré and Africa Unite are not just trending topics, they are rallying cries that unite millions in common cause. Through videos, articles, live streams, and conversations, Africans across the continent and around the world are weaving together a fabric of resistance that transcends borders and languages. This digital revolution matters because traditional media has too often failed Africa. Too often, African voices have been silenced or distorted by narratives crafted elsewhere. Today, with smartphones and internet connections, Africans are telling their own stories, documenting their own struggles, and refusing to let their dreams be buried beneath layers of foreign bias and misinformation. Nowhere is the energy of this new movement more visible than among Africa's youth. With more than 60% of Africa's population under the age of 25, the youth are not just the future, they are the present. They are no longer content to wait for change to trickle down from aging elites. They are demanding change now, in education, in governance, in economic opportunity, and in global respect. They are using technology not just for entertainment, but for organization. They are mobilizing protests, building businesses, creating art, and spreading messages of empowerment that previous generations could only dream of. The protests on April 30th will be fueled by this youthful energy. Young Africans are taking ownership of the future, understanding that the struggle for sovereignty is not something they can delegate to others. They recognize that if they do not fight for their dreams, no one else will. Their passion is reshaping the continent's political landscape, forcing a reckoning with outdated systems and old assumptions. They are the beating heart of this movement, and they will not be silenced. The call for African sovereignty, therefore, is not just political, it is deeply personal. It is about the right to dream without fear, to build without interference, to live with dignity. It is about refusing to accept a world where African lives are seen as bargaining chips, where African resources are stripped away, and where African futures are dictated from afar. On April 30th, those marching in cities and towns across Africa and the diaspora will not be walking alone. They will carry the dreams of their ancestors, the hopes of their children, and the determination of a continent that refuses to be broken. They will declare with their voices, with their feet, with their presence, that Africa's future will be written by Africans, not by outsiders. If you believe in this future, you must act. If you can join a protest, do so. If you cannot, raise your voice online, in your communities, and in your conversations. Share this message, educate those around you. Challenge the narratives that seek to diminish Africa's right to choose its own path. Subscribe to this channel if you believe sovereignty is sacred. Like this video if you believe Africa's destiny belongs to no one but Africans themselves. Share it widely so that the message of unity, dignity, and freedom can reach every corner of the world. Together, we are stronger. Together, we are sovereign. Together, we are history in the making.